Hello, this is Turner Triggers Intertrader Masterclass, and I am your host, Sylvia Hantea. I am thrilled to have today Randi Fine, an expert, an amazing expert that will help us to understand more about trauma, childhood, and diving into techniques and how we can explore and not being afraid of what we are feeling today as adults. So I would love you, Randi, to introduce yourself to our audience and tell us what is your work about, how you work, yes, and what is your insights in this world for us.
Okay. So I am a narcissistic abuse specialist expert, and I work with people who have had issues with the abuse from a narcissist. So I'm not working with the actual person who has the disorder. I'm working with those who have been affected by it. And I have my own podcast called A Fine Time for Healing, which I've been doing for 8 or 9 years. And I do shows about all kinds of well-being, spiritual, physical, mental, psychological. And I'm also the author of my latest book called Close Encounters of the Worst Kind, which is the Narcissistic Abuse Survivor's Guide to Healing. I counsel people all over the world because this is a problem that is pervasive in every culture, in every country of the world. And the problem is that traditional therapists are not trained to deal with this particular problem. And so what happens is when people who have been abused this way go for traditional therapy, they end up getting worse. So this is a niche that I can fill. And part of what makes me so good at filling that is I am the victim survivor of childhood narcissistic abuse myself. And that you must live it to understand it because it is so very confusing.
Yes, absolutely. And I agree with that. I have clients that are going to traditional therapists and they end up so confused. So you are so right. And they come to me and like, I don't understand what I am doing right. So because they were in a relationship with narcissists, they take everything like personally. I am doing something wrong here. And it's so important. The work that you're doing is amazing. So this is why here my first question is coming. Why is it so important to talk about our trauma?
Okay. Well, trauma affects us on so many levels, and it's something that can paralyze us. You know, what happens is, it's specifically if trauma happens in childhood, which generally this is what sets us up for other problems in life. Now, of course, we can have traumas that have nothing to do with our childhood, just being victimized by situations. But in childhood, we are supposed to learn how to become individuals, and that's something that happens very gradually. But it's also something that parents are there to support and encourage. But the other things that parents are supposed to support and encourage are teaching coping mechanisms, healthy coping mechanisms, teaching the child to trust their intuition, teaching the child that they're really special and to like themselves. And so when these things are not taught in childhood, we hit adulthood and we cannot function properly in life because you need to have all these precursors of development in order to be able to function healthily in life. And so I say, you know, whereas those of us who have had abuse issues starting in childhood, when we get to be 18 or 21 and all our friends are sort of taken off and just soaring in life, that's where we find we're plummeting. And we have problems with our intimate relationships. We have problems pretty much in every relationship of our life. and we don't always know exactly what this is. Often there's codependency issues that are holding us up, and we are living our life pleasing other people instead of requiring what it is we need for us. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, so basically it's so important to speak up for what we feel and what we experienced with the right people, of course, because this will help us basically unfold and not staying hidden anymore. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct. You know, when we don't know what to do with our feelings, we tend to stuff them inside. And what we do is we build walls, because painful feelings are painful. So we're trying to protect ourselves in the only way that we know how. If we don't have the proper coping mechanisms, what we do is we build up walls and we block everything out. But at the same time that we're blocking everything out, we're holding everything in. And there's only so much that we can hold in before it starts seeping through the cracks. And when it seeps through cracks, we end up with problems that are physical, emotional, psychological, and mental. And we don't usually know why we're having these problems, because if we stuff these feelings for so long, we aren't really in touch with the fact that we have all these things inside of us often.
Exactly. And
so it is important to start bringing them out. And it's a very hard thing to do on your own, because you don't know what to do with the feelings that come up around the incidents that have happened.
Exactly. And this is why people shut down and don't speak about that, deny it, repress it, and just go in life like everything is okay. It's perfect. I am like everybody. And
Right.
This is why all these dysfunctions in people's life are happening, and they don't see the correlation to what happened to them, because they
Right.
stay in denial, right?
Yeah, and the other thing that we tend to do is we tend to look at everyone else and compare ourselves to them. And so if everybody's walking around and they seem like they're fine, well, we feel odd for not being fine. So we hide it. We don't share it with other people. What we don't realize is everyone is walking around with something that they're keeping inward. And those of us who can actually find a way to let this out in a healthy way, we have that opportunity for so much growth in our life, where those who don't want to look at it pretty much stay stagnant and they don't do a lot of growth in their life.
Yes, exactly. And usually what is happening, because everybody around is so different from us, or we know they didn't experience the thing that we did, we feel like somehow, exactly as you said, odd and weird. And so we just like don't want to look at them, because we don't feel understood by people. So we just don't know what to do. So finding the right people to speak to open up, to let it out, to cry, to release, it's super important. So another question that I would love us to talk is, what is childhood telling us about who we are today?
Childhood tells us everything about who we are today. You know, there's no anybody that thinks that their childhood has nothing to do with the life that they're living as an adult is fooling themselves, because we are, just as a building starts with a foundation and is built up, so are we. And if we don't have the right foundation, the strong foundation in which to develop, then we don't have a strong building. We have a house of cards, and it can be knocked down very easily. So everything that goes into childhood is important for us. And as I said before, you know, my feeling is that self-love is probably the most important thing we have to possess in order for us to go through life comfortably, successfully. And often we feel that self-love is selfish, and we may learn that in childhood.
Mm-hmm.
We may learn that thinking of ourselves is hurting someone else, when truly self-love is, when we have self-love, we have more to give. When we don't, people who tend to give a lot as adults and they feel drained and they feel like nobody ever gives back and they're disappointed in people all the time, it's because they're being drained. They're not giving themselves anything to fill that well that they're giving out from. So our childhood is everything, and good parenting is the most valuable thing that any child can have and any person can have.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we don't, I know a lot of people that don't see that their childhood created exactly who they are today, and the issues that they have can be solved only by doing some inner child work and going there and exploring there. But of course it's painful, because when we start this inner child work, what is coming up first is all the pain. And people just are so scared in a society where everybody wants to be happy, just like be focused on positive and be happy. And this is so overwhelming, because you can't be happy all the time. And this is what we are expected this when we were children, to be happy all the time, to not express who we are, to not express all the palette of our feelings.
True.
So absolutely agree with everything you said. So,
right. And there was just one other thing I wanted to add to that. Boundaries, emotional boundary systems are so important. And if we're in a family where it's discouraged to have emotional boundary systems, then we are just so vulnerable to everything that comes down the pike. And life is not easy. We need to have these tools. We need to be able to know where we let off and others begin, and be able to express that.
absolutely, boundaries. Oh yes, absolutely. And of course, when you are in a family where you are not allowed to have boundaries, you just have to do what you're told to do. It's super hard as adults to set those boundaries and understand that setting boundaries is not hurting people or pushing them away. Usually people react to that like, but I feel like I'm pushing people away from me, when actually we are so used to push ourselves away, or like hurt ourselves, that we don't even care how we feel all the time, right? We feel like, "Ugh, I don't want to hurt anybody. I don't want to hurt anybody." So it's so important. So if we approached a lot inner child work and trauma, but in all this work, it's a lot coming about shadow and our own shadow, our own, the part of us that we don't like, that we don't want to see, that we don't want to explore at all. And when people hear about shadow work, they're like, shadow, I don't like this, even how this I don't even want to know anything about it.
Right.
How we can explore it without being scary? How can we go there without being frightened?
Well, our past is meant to teach us, but we're not meant to live in it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's okay to look back. It's okay to look at it and remember, but we don't want to exist in that pain. So, but we have to remember these experiences. And what I find, generally, the first call that that my clients make to me for counseling, once the experience is validated, so much just comes up. It's amazing. Memories just come flooding to the surface like crazy. So, so validation that you're okay, that what you experienced is okay, that you can work through it. And the idea of hope is so important, that knowing that you will get past this if this is what you choose. It really helps to let go of some of that. However, there are a lot of situations where pain defines us. And when it defines us for so many years, we don't know who we are without it. So sometimes we're afraid to let go of that identity, of that past, of those things that have happened to us, because we don't know who we'll be when we let that go. Right? So it's a process, but it's so important to work with someone, that a professional that knows how to work with you. And when you're vetting someone for a professional, you want to feel really good with that person. If somebody is condescending or judgmental or scolding, that's not the right person for you. So, I don't want people to reach out for help and then be discouraged because they're not getting what they need. But you should have compassion and empathy from the person who you're working with so that they can help you through this and you can trust them. I had a stress expert on my podcast one time, and she was saying that she finds that the most valuable, not cure, but help for those with post-traumatic stress disorder and complex post-traumatic stress disorder is that they are working with someone that they completely, unequivocally trust. Mm-hmm. That when they can talk about these things in a very safe, trusting environment, often it helps them to overcome the trauma.
Exactly. Having this space of safety, because as most of us who experienced trauma, we didn't experience being safe. We don't open up just because the world around us is not safe. So finding somebody that you can open up and feeling, because we are energetic beings, we just feel the person. Can I trust this person? So if we open up, this is such a gift, because here where the healing starts.
Right. And there's, and another thing that I think I tell this to everyone, and I talk about it on my shows and everything, is that many of us have gotten away from trusting our intuition, trusting that feeling. We always know what is best for us, what is right and what is wrong for us. And a lot of times we second guess it because either we've been taught to second guess it, we've been taught that, the way we perceive things is not really the way it is. But when we truly learn to trust that, it is the best guidance in our life. We can never go wrong with our intuition.
Exactly. And we unfortunately lose touch with it in childhood, right? So this is why it's important to go back to our foundation, to our roots, as you said, to our foundation, and to explore it and to see what happened there, that today I'm so completely disconnected from who I am.
Right.
Yeah. And I would like to, if you want to share something about some techniques, how we can, one or two techniques for our audience to how they can free themselves in a space where they experience all this turmoil, emotional, and all this pain happening, and they just don't know what to do.
Deal with it, right? One of the best things that anybody can do is writing, expressing things in writing, because we're very free. We can take our time. We don't have to have a project that's finished, from beginning to end. Writing down the thoughts that you're having will really help to bring them out. I don't recommend sharing them with other people per se, maybe a professional, I don't know. But that act of writing is very cathartic. There are a lot of exercises that I use in my book for all different kinds of issues. But what I talk about in my book is building what I call the inner experience, and that's self-validation, self-love, self-affirmation. So it's very important to recognize the way we talk to ourselves, to understand that a lot of what we say to ourselves has nothing to do with today. It is not relevant to our current life, and we didn't put those thoughts in there. It was generally put in by someone else who had some sort of agenda. So I think it's really important not to listen to the dialogues in our head, but to create a dialogue that is healthy for us, that is positive. There are so many messages that we tell ourselves that have nothing to do with it. And one of the exercises that I do is I have my clients go through all the potential messages that they might have been told to figure out which ones still really are true and relevant. And if whatever they discover is true and relevant, to find support for that. Sit down and think about it. How do I support that truth? And if you can't, well, then you have to dismiss it. So that's another tool that I share.
Yeah, amazing tools, awesome tools. And I so love our conversation because it's so full of, like in like 15 minutes, we talked so much and explored so much. And before we will conclude our dialogue and our conversation, what would you like to share? What will leave our audience with? Something that you want to just share with our audience.
Okay. What I want to share is that don't be afraid to reach out for help. There are some issues that we can work through on our own. We can think our way through them. But there are many that we cannot. And specifically what I deal with narcissistic abuse. This is a form of mind control and brainwashing. And your brain is changed. The pathways are grooved in a very negative way, in a way that is taking you in a wrong direction. And so while we wish that we could think our way out of these things, we can't always do that. And that has nothing to do with our level of education, sophistication, how much we've accomplished, our ability to problem solve. It has nothing to do with any of those things. There are just some things that we cannot work our way through without a little bit of help. Some people only need a little nudge. They need a little, they may have one session and it may click and they may got it, you know? And I don't really believe in long-term therapy. I think that if you're in long-term therapy, something is not right. I don't think, and I never want my clients to have to stay in long-term therapy. The faster I can graduate them, the happier I am. So, so that's another thing. So my website is randigfine.com. That's RandiGFine.com. There's a lot of great information on that website. My podcast is called A Fine Time for Healing. That's on Blog Talk Radio. But I have a page on my website where you can access every show. There's links to them and descriptions. I'm also all over YouTube and, the traditional other social networks. So I can be found pretty much everywhere.
Amazing. Go and check Randi's website and please show your book again so that we can, yeah.
So my book is called Close Encounters of the Worst Kind.
Yeah.
The Narcissistic Abuse Survivor's Guide to Healing and Recovery. Mm-hmm. And it is the most comprehensive book on this subject ever written. All you have to do is read the reviews. Don't listen to me, read the reviews. But it's been very helpful, and it's something that we should all have on our bookshelf.
Absolutely.
So thank you for asking. And it's available on Amazon.
Awesome. So I'm so grateful for this conversation together that will enrich people's life and will give them a hope and a new light to they are not alone and this can be solved and we need to talk about our pain in order to release it and to heal it.
Yes.
So thank you so much, Randi, for being with us here today.
You are so welcome. Thank you for having me, Sylvia. It's been a great experience. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.